Well, welcome everybody. I'm really happy you came today because it takes a community to be a community. It takes a village to show up, homework done or not. We were talking earlier about homework. Do not worry about the homework. So it doesn't matter if you've read this or today or yesterday or 100 times in the past. It doesn't even matter. All it matters is right this minute, this precious moment, with who you are, each of you with your longer hair and your patient selves or impatient selves in your own homes. It's so intimate. And I'm just starting out with a lot of gratitude for community and for love and compassion in the midst of chaos. And there's always that little core of peace and grace in the middle of chaos when I am able to turn to it and draw upon it. And seeing your faces is just does it for me. I'll tell you that this particular patchwork quilt is so precious. I chose this reading, and I've already talked to a number of people, and probably many of you have chosen this reading in times in your life. And from that little tiny book by Rainer Maria Rilke. And this particular passage, I had read it before and saved it and so forth. But recently, it's become just a tiny bit of a spiritual practice for me. I'd like to say, speaking of homework, Diane, I'd like to say I do it consistently. I do not. It would behoove me to, though, because the way I allow myself to become agitated and anxious and fearful and angry and reactive and worried and totally unconstructive and dysfunctional to my own self is by being drawn into the chaos of events and going into that place in my mind where I think I have to know answers, where I think I have to figure something out, where I take it all into myself as if I'm supposed to make anything better, including myself. And I forget that God is in this. And it's not just an idea that God is in this, or our divine source is in the fabric of all of it, but that God is always accessible. And the big thing about dealing with questions and what I just said about I've put myself into uncertainty, fear, doubt, worry, all of which just freezes me up, darkens my light, and makes me of no use. All of that is what has been called playing God. It's trying to take over the job of a force and a source greater than I am, that I can't begin to comprehend or explain. And this little passage is just so wonderful because it tells me to quit doing that. So I'm going to read it once, then I want to just say a couple of things to you, and then we're going to do a 20-minute meditation, having listened to the reading. And I'll read it. I guess I'll screen share it. Let me read it once, and then I'll screen share it, and we can sort of go over it together. Have patience with everything that remains unsolved in your heart. Try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books written in a foreign language. Do not now look for the answers. They cannot now be given to you because you could not live them. It is a question of experiencing everything. At present, you need to live the question. I'm just going to repeat that one line. At present, you need to live the question. Perhaps you will gradually, without even noticing it, find yourself experiencing the answer some distant day. Now let me just share this. Have patience with everything that remains unsolved in your heart. Try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books written in a foreign language. Do not now look for the answers. They cannot now be given to you because you could not live them. It is a question of experiencing everything. At present, you need to live the question. Perhaps you will gradually, without even noticing it, find yourself experiencing the answer some distant day. And just on that last little part, without even noticing it, find yourself experiencing the answer some distant day. From the rereading of this, as I said, not quite daily, but frequently recently, I am beginning to notice things I now know or that have now been developed or discovered in our wider culture and wider society and healthcare and everything that when I was 50 or 40 or 30 or 20 were not even a dream or an idea in anybody's mind that anybody could see. And this brings me to trust that, impossible as all of this may seem, this is true, what Rilke said to his young poet friend. So what I would like to invite us to do is to just close your eyes or whatever you do to go inward. And we'll take, I guess, about 20 minutes and allow yourself to, all the questions you have to bubble up and be in your mind and be friendly with them. And watch yourself not struggle, but let them drift by and hold them and thank them and bless them, and don't worry about the answers. We'll do a 20-minute meditation and then I'll ring the bell. And then afterwards, anybody who wants to will stay on for 10 or 15 minutes and we can share with each other about this experience. Well, welcome back from wherever you've been. Welcome back to the present. And I just invite you now to, I think, can we just unmute everybody? Jennifer?
Elizabeth, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Oh, I am talking. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
No.
I am able to hear her.
I can hear you.
Yeah, me too.
They may have turned their
I can't
sound
hear you.
down.
Yeah,
It's only you, Sandra.
What's wrong with me?
Did you hear this? Did you turn the sound down on your computer?
Yeah.
Anyway, and so if you would like to speak a little bit about what you, what are your questions and learning to, and whether you're loving them. I realized thinking back over all of our Sunday services, our Zoom services, this is what we've been doing with David's message from the early morning and then the Zoom service. We've been living the questions together because David always gives us a question, and this is living, you know, this is what Rainer Maria Rilke was telling this young dude to do, and we've been doing it in our community every week since COVID started. Actually, the whole time, long before that happened, but just noting that. So I guess you could raise your hands and Jerry. Jerry, you need to unmute. Oh, do I have to unmute you? I'm sorry.
He can do it himself.
How's that?
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. So I have kind of a vague answer. My first response to the reading was, well, this is a young person that he's speaking to. And so I think a lot of my original response was a lot of my questions have been answered, or they just organically get answered. And I don't really have any questions. That was my first response. My next response was, wait a minute. There's this series of questions. Who am I? What am I? And where am I going? Which come from my early meditation days, just kind of bubbled out. And so I was left with one more thing. The unexamined life is not worth living. And am I examining my life enough? Am I being introspective enough in the truest, best sense of the word? So I ended up getting left with a lot of questions that, so in a way I agree with, who was it, Rilke?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna remute myself.
Thanks, Jerry. Sherry, did you have your hand up, Sherry?
Yeah, I just stuck it up. I just got out of the shower. Actually, I have an appointment with my chiropractor for the first time in about 4 months. I thought I better get really clean. That passage, I actually have it on my phone here. I'm going to keep it, is so timely for me. I've been doing fine living here in my house by myself, but there's this deep longing that seems to be surfacing in the last week or so for my person, my one person besides myself, who is that I really have a deep connection with, and I'm really missing that in my life. And sort of on a funny note is I saw your cat go by from the back. It looked just like mine. And I just went to my granddaughter's 6th grade graduation, and one of the little boys was expressing gratitude for his cat, who's been sitting on his lap for the last bunch of years. And I do have that. But anyway, this passage was just so perfect for me. So thank you.
Thanks, Sherry. David, can you unmute? Thank you.
Yeah. I was, one of the first things that I thought about, or that came to the surface for me, was how, this concept of living the questions is very much baked into the psyche and the soul of our community. It's, even in our church covenant, and it's something that's been an identifier of this community for many decades. And it occurred to me during my meditation time, the word loving the questions. And it occurred to me that I have a much easier time living the questions than loving them. And that I had an experience the other night when I was in yoga with Diana, and she had us lying, sort of face down flat on the floor, and just, she used the term surrender. And I don't know why that connected somehow in my spirit during this meditation, that sort of connected with this idea of loving the questions. So there's just so much about the world right now that I don't love. And I really struggle and would love answers, but I need to love the questions. And so that's what I'm left with today. And that's what I'm going to be returning to in terms of practice, loving the questions.
Thanks, David. Sandra.
Just riffing off of what David said, I think there might be a way of loving that isn't sentimental or emotional or, with a lot of ardor or anything like that. I can imagine loving being something more like containing, just opening one's arms wide enough to put them around and just to hold, just to create a container. And then my other thought, kind of unrelated, but it all fits together, is that I think a lot of questions do contain their own answers, but it takes time for them to emerge. So there's that wisdom of what he's calling us to do, give it time. And that's partly to allow ourselves to mature and be ready to recognize the answer when it emerges. But I think it's also might have to do with the idea that questions in a certain way, you could say, already contain their answers, but not always visibly, and it may take experience and time for them to emerge.
Thanks, Sandra. Jolene.
Yeah, this was a very interesting passage for me, and it reminded me of when I was 14, I made a statement to myself about a quality that I wanted to embody. I mean, I didn't use those words, but that was basically a quality that I wanted to have in myself, that just was something I naturally would express. And I followed that. I didn't look for the answers. Did not go on this big program to get there. And it took me, I realized it took me until I was 40 to be living with that quality. And so I have an example of waiting, of just hanging out and just allowing the thing to come. Now that's a long time to wait, 26 years or whatever. But it helps me in this current situation where it feels to me like there are many questions coming up every day for me to look at. How am I going to live? How am I going to live into this or contribute in a positive way to this situation? And I do find myself mostly sitting and kind of waiting for the answer to arise. And I mean, there are so many, it's kind of hard to know what's arising when, but I had not seen this reading before, and I took a screenshot, so I have it now, and I appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Jolynn. Forgive me for commenting directly on your share, but I heard you more from saying waiting, 26 years of waiting, to then you went on to say living. And I think you just exemplified what this is saying, that, you know, just be with the question in you, but while living. And you lived into the answer, or the whatever you would call it. Anyway, did you have your hand up, Dan? Dan, go ahead.
One of the pieces, I tend to be a big thinker, but I don't always end up with answers. But one of the biggest things for me is what we're doing to this planet, and trying to figure out, given the detriment that we are doing with our trash and a whole variety of other kinds of things, trying to figure out, the question for me is, what role can I play in it, where it's going to make some difference, either in my own thinking about it, or in the actions I can take that may help me find another community that I can plug into that is working towards the same end. And I'm living the question, but the answers are, I don't expect one tomorrow. It would be great, but it'd be nice to see. To me, some of the things that are exciting is coming out of what's happened just in the last week is, you know, looking at the police forces and you know, as compared to community. I forget the acronym people use to substitute for police. That is a more kinder, gentler way of finding ways in which we can live more in harmony with others. Anyway, so that's why I spend time.
Thank you, Dan. Something that came to me is phrasing the questions like a question. And one of them that came to me is, I think it was Parker Palmer, who teaches in lots of things, but he had this thing of saying, when confronted with a conflict or challenging situation, to say to yourself, what I wonder, when a person confronts you with a conflicting view with you, rather than coming back with a conflicting, you know, it's just, I wonder. And I think that's a way of holding the questions. I wonder if, or maybe morphing the question into another question that's more. And the other one that comes to mind is, what if we this, or what if I didn't know how to, you know, just anyway, I can't complete that thought. I just thought I'd bring those two phrases into this conversation. Sally. Wait, Sally. You have to unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself? You're muted, Sally. Jennifer, do you know how to unmute her?
Yeah, so Sally, I've been sending you an ask to unmute request, so you should see that coming up on your computer. But it's not working.
Or can she just hold down the space bar? Does that work?
So Sally, feel free to type your response into the chat and or try to rejoin this Zoom link, but we're not able to hear you.
We can try that.
There
There you go.
There you go.
I had to use the arrow. Anyway, I had this little dilemma today about, was I going to do this or was I going to do another Zoom thing? And I thought the whole time my mind was running on this question, doing this question, and I thought, you've already decided you're here. But then, of course, I couldn't unmute myself, so I don't know. I don't have any big, deep, profound thoughts, but that it was the going back and forth that I was doing during the meditation. That's it.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Sally. Louise?
I stayed in the very tiny questions. I realized I hadn't been taking time to meditate in a while, and so I was just grateful for that. And then was just thinking as if I was walking on the labyrinth, you know, what's the question to start the walk, and then the answer might come to you. And I was just surprised at the little things that the questions that came up about how was I going to handle this, or how is it, all of a sudden I got an answer, and I kind of was laughing, and then another one came up, but it was just being gentle enough, like you were mentioning, being gentle enough and holding the question and taking time to be quiet, where things started bubbling up. So I just appreciated this meditation. And my mom always used to say, I wonder, it was such a polite, she was French, and there was a sort of a polite way of saying things. Even if she was gossiping, she would say, I wonder why that would happen. And so it would just be like, instead of putting somebody down, it was more like, okay, yeah, it was something to think about, and then just drop it. Don't make a judgment. And so when you said that, it just made me giggle that I always appreciated that outlook.
Thanks, Louise. Well, anybody else? Bob. Can you unmute yourself, Bob?
Pretty handsome beard there, Bob.
I just want to thank Elizabeth for this passage. In the late 60s, when I was full of a lot of rage and self-righteousness, my oldest brother gave me this slim copy of Letters to a Young Poet with this passage highlighted for me. And so now I feel myself with new rage, and here this passage is confronting me again. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Confronting you again now that you're an old poet, Bob.
I'm sorry?
It's confronting you again now that you're an old poet.
Yeah, really.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everybody. And before we go offline, before I go offline, I'm going to screen share it again in case you didn't get a chance to copy it and paste it wherever you would like to paste it. So I'll do that. And meanwhile, many blessings and much love to you.
Okay, it's on the email. The passage is on the email.
Oh, right. And now I see that it looks like it isn't on my screen. It's not saying, I tried to screen share it, but I don't have it anyway.
But like she said, it's good because we all got it when we got the email announcement. It's right in there.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for that.
Sherry said it first.
Oh, Sherry said it. Oh, God. Well, your names both begin with S. What can I say? One of the questions is, what's her name? I'm learning to love the question instead of hate it. My blessings to everybody and lots of love. I'm embracing you with my big embrace. Bye for now. See you Sunday.
Bye for now. Thank you again, Elizabeth, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you all for being here.